Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon, founder and voice of Falcons Drip. First off, I want to welcome back anybody who's checked out the show already. This is episode number 3. I hope you guys enjoy and continue to enjoy. I also want to welcome anybody who's here for the first time. We are going to be diving into tight ends today, and hopefully if we have time, we will kind of talk about the fullbacks a little bit. First off, we're going to start with just who's on the roster and where we think this roster is going to go as far as the tight end position. And I'm feeling a little under the weather today, but before we kind of jump into it, Ferg, why don't you tell everybody what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. So today we're talking about tight ends. I have a lot of questions for both Thon and Jeff. A lot of uncertainty for me. Kyle Pitts, the addition of Kyle Pitts at the tight end position is super, super important for the team. Makes that position much more exciting than it's been in prior years. So, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about the tight ends.
Awesome. Jeff, anything before we kind of jump into it?
I really wish we had AC in here. It is real hot. We might have to make an addition before next time, but I'm ready for this. And let's get started.
Yeah. For those of you guys who don't know, we are sitting here socially distant because we're towards the end of a pandemic. We're sitting here in a barn, spaced out, looking at each other, and it just had some hot rain, so it's muggy, it's hot, but that's not going to stop us from getting this thing
Jeff
going.
did not dress for the occasion.
Yeah, Jeff is also in long sleeves, so if he sounds worse than everybody else, that's why. So jumping right into it, tight ends. We talked about quarterbacks, and personally, I think this position is the most important position on our roster after the quarterback. With the addition of Kyle Pitts and his versatility, we talk about versatility a lot, but Arthur Smith's going to be able to do a lot of different things, and we'll kind of jump into that.
Thon, can I interrupt you for a second? You said something that struck a chord with me, and I want to know more about it. You said the tight end position is the most important position behind the quarterback position this year? Or are you just saying generally speaking?
Not generally. For Arthur Smith's offense.
Okay.
For what he does and the mismatches he creates, this is the second most important position.
And just provide some clarity, if you don't mind, for maybe some of our new reviewers. Who is Arthur Smith, and what kind of, why is the tight end position so important?
Definitely. So Arthur Smith is our new head coach, offensive coordinator last year from the Tennessee Titans. He comes over, like I said, our new head coach. We got rid of Julio Jones in the offseason, which we've talked about before, but we're able to do that because of what Arthur Smith can do and bring, and the versatility that Kyle Pitts adds to the team. And I'm going to jump more into that as we go along. I want to start off talking about Kyle, and then I want to talk about one of the other tight ends that we have on the team. And then with those two probably being our starting 1 and 2 tight ends, I want to jump into a little bit of what Arthur Smith likes to do with them and how it's so important to this offense.
Sounds great.
So, Kyle, I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole because I could talk about him all day. We took him number 4 overall in the draft for a reason. In my opinion, he was if you were to bet on someone in this draft being a Hall of Famer, he's the person who I'd put all my money on. Why? I think he was the best. Maybe you could say Trevor Lawrence, but the quarterback position has so much more riding on it, if that makes any sense. That's harder to say that Trevor Lawrence will be good where, Kyle Pitts, 6'6", runs a 4.4 with just a ridiculous reach, and his ability to track the ball, his ability to run routes. Like, he runs like he's Odell Beckham, but he catches the ball like he's Tony Gonzalez. Kyle Trask, who was his quarterback in college, I didn't think was so great, but
he's going to be great.
Kyle Pitts,
let me just say that. He's going to be great.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts is going to be great.
Well, it's Kyle Pitts, but so is Mr. Trask there.
Only because he's sitting
sir,
down.
That's right. Exactly.
Let's hope not, because we'll have to play him twice a year. So, Kyle Pitts, is there do either of you guys think he's not going to be the number 1 tight end this year?
No, he's definitely going to be the number 1. I can't imagine him not being. That's who they just invested a lot in. They said we can let Julio go if we get this guy, clearly. So he has to play.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what Jeff said. I concur.
And if he's not, we take him number 4 overall, expecting him to come in and expecting him to be a stud. And if not, it's going to be bad for us this year.
Yeah, I certainly agree.
Granted, Pitts is only 20 years old, so he's got a lot of time to grow. So it won't be a complete bust if he doesn't come in. But we're really banking on him this year.
Well, you're banking on him, but the good news is there are other very good players in the offense. It's not like he's got the whole load on his shoulders.
Definitely.
Like the expectations are high, but it's not all on him.
Yeah.
Definitely. So he's the clear-cut number 1. And then you have Hayden Hurst, who we both agree is the number 2 tight, or we all agree who's the number 2 tight end, unless I'm wrong.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Honestly, I don't know. Can you tell me why? Why is he the clear-cut number 2 tight end?
Hayden Hurst last year had over 500 yards. He was a number 1 overall pick a couple years ago. We invested a second-round pick for him. Athletically, he's a mismatch for defenses. He's faster than linebackers. He's bigger than corners, bigger than safeties most of the time too. He's not as extreme as Kyle Pitts is, but he's good enough to be a problem.
When you say extreme, meaning like statistically or physically, he's not as freakish or okay,
exactly.
Right.
They call. There's a reason why Kyle. They were both first round tight ends. Kyle Pitts was number 4. Hayden Hurst was 27, 20 in the later.
Yeah, he
mid-20s.
certainly had a good NFL career thus far. Excuse me.
And he was a little buried on the depth chart for Baltimore, but he came over and played pretty well. And he really didn't get as many targets as I feel like he should have, especially if you're investing a second-round pick.
Right.
But Dirk Cutter, who was our offensive coordinator last year.
When I say he's certainly had a good NFL career, I just want to clarify. What I'm referring to is he's made it past 2.5 years, and I think 2.5 years is like the average expectancy for.
Definitely.
Right, so he's, and there's no signs that he's going to drop off. So that's all.
Exactly. And Kirk Cousins, Dirk Cutter, for whatever reason, doesn't like to throw to the tight ends very much and doesn't really like to design up a lot of plays for tight ends, which is going to be very different this year. So, anything about Hayden Hurst that you guys feel like I should talk about that we have?
Yeah, I'd like to know a couple things. In addition to what you've already mentioned, how frequently do you think he's going to get into the game? I mean, how many snaps do you think he's going to take?
I'm glad you asked that because that's where I was going to go next. So, if you look at the Tennessee Titans last year, they ran 12 personnel 35% of the time, which is more than anyone else in the entire NFL. What is 12 personnel? When you're looking at personnel groupings, the first number is running backs and the second number is tight ends. So by 12, the 1 is 1 running back, 2 is 2 tight ends, and then it's assumed that there are 2 receivers on the field. So to the Titans last year, Arthur Smith ran more 12 personnel than anyone in the entire NFL.
Let me ask you something. Is 12 personnel akin to like sixth man in basketball?
What do you mean by that?
So here's the thing. You guys remember when Deion Waiters was playing for Syracuse? And
yes.
he, I'm pretty sure he got sixth man of the year, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My point is they ran 6 men more than probably any other team. You have some teams out there that they're starting 5 play, almost the entire duration of the game. Syracuse, when Deion Waiters was there, they ran 6 men. Deion Waiters played more than many of the starters, meaning at the end of the game, if you looked at how much time he put in on the court, it was more than many of the starters. That's what I'm asking.
Like
for some clarity for myself and other people listening.
That just depends on your style of offense, right? So where some teams might be you have 3 receivers and the slot receiver is considered a starter because you're not playing with a fullback or whatever. So I imagine that Arthur Smith's going to come in and our base package, our starting package is going to be 12.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So 12 being and we expect the two tight ends to be.
So in other words, not really. It's not really akin to a 6th man in basketball, right?
No.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It could be for some team, for some teams.
It just depends on the composition of the team and how they want to utilize their players.
Sure.
So, like I said, Tennessee ran 35% of the time, more than anyone else in the NFL. I think maybe tied with Philadelphia, but 2 tight ends. Now, when you're looking at those 2 tight ends that Philadelphia had, they had Jonnu Smith and Anthony
Tennessee
Ferg.
had.
Tennessee had. You're looking at Jonnu Smith and Fersker. Andrew Fersker?
Anthony Fergser.
Anthony Fersker. Sorry, I keep botching his name. But when you look at those 2 guys where they, Tennessee ran those 2 tight ends a ton, and you compare them to the 2 tight ends that we have, Jonnu Smith athletically is very comparable to Hayden Hurst. So that right there, you see, okay, like you got 2 guys very comparable, probably be used similarly. But when you look at Fersker versus Pitts, it's not even close. Athletically, Pitts is on a whole nother level than Jonnu Smith and Hayden Hurst. So I couldn't imagine, with how much Arthur Smith ran 12 personnel, I couldn't imagine us not running that even more. I wouldn't be shocked if we ran 12 personnel 50% of the time. That's how much. That's how confident I am. So now, when you look at 12 personnel, just because you have 2 tight ends doesn't mean that both tight ends are up on the line. So what happens is these defenses see 2 tight ends coming into the game. Now, this is where the mismatches are really important. Kyle Pitts is faster than linebackers, faster than most. Honestly, he's faster than most DBs and most corners.
Sure. Maybe not corners, but like safeties, right?
So he ran a 4.4. There's a ton of corners.
A really good point.
Your elite corners, like he's not faster than every corner. But that doesn't matter, because if you have a corner, he's going to jump.
You're saying your standard cornerback, right? I get what you're saying.
But so let's say this. So you come in and you've got your 12 personnel, and let's say the defense responds by putting in 3 linebackers.
What do you do with Kyle Pitts? That's what do you do with Kyle Pitts? It seems like you're going there, so I don't mean to.
Yeah. So they come in. Let's say they go through.
Right. How do you?
Yeah, defensively they go 3 linebackers. I'm going to answer the question. I don't know. You come in.
But this is how you would do it, right?
No, I'm telling you what I would do on offense.
What they're going to do.
Okay. So they're going to come in 3 linebackers, and they're going to say, okay, you know what? Like, maybe Kyle Pitts isn't as good of a blocker against the linebacker. Let's space him out. Let's put him in the slot. Now we're taking the linebacker out of the box, and let's say we realize it's man, right? So the linebacker has Kyle Pitts man-to-man. Matt Ryan can chuck to a pass play, and now that linebacker has to try and cover Kyle Pitts.
He's toast.
Yeah.
At that point, no chance.
And now let's say the defense responds by saying, okay, like Kyle Pitts, whatever, let's put in a cornerback. They put a cornerback in. Kyle Pitts is a good enough blocker. He's going to hoss that cornerback, and they're going to have an advantage in the run game.
Yeah.
So when we talk about versatility and 12
even
personnel,
that, he might be able to just chuck the corner.
Yeah, he really
6'6",
might.
240, 250. It's a lot
Definitely.
for somebody who's 190 pounds to handle.
And so now we talk about him, and Hayden Hurst is maybe not as freaky as Kyle Pitts is, but he's a matchup nightmare in himself, because same thing, linebackers have a hard time covering him, and he's definitely going to block corners. Now you could try and go safeties, but even safeties most of the time, these tight ends are going to be able to block the safeties pretty easily, and safeties cannot keep up with either of them, or if it's a pass, like they're going to body him up. So that's why that's why I think this is like a lock. Like, we're going to run a ton of 12 personnel. We're going to have these 2 guys out on the field a lot.
Just specifically about Hayden Hurst, he came into the league very raw, really not that great of a blocker. He's shown some growth in that area, so I think it makes the 12 personnel a lot more viable, because he's less one-dimensional than when he came in, which I think is great.
Yeah. And I think part of that too could be kind of like an attitude thing, right? Like if with Dirk Cutter, they really weren't like worried about the run game. It was like pass.
Yeah, it's attitude, and he played baseball before coming to the NFL. Like, he really wasn't focused on football for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back and trying to adjust the NFL game after some years off of football, is very challenging.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got these two guys as roster locks, and they're not the only tight ends that are roster locks. We traded a 7th-round pick for Lee Smith, who's a big blocking tight end. We traded him from the Buffalo Bills. We got him from the Buffalo Bills, and he is just a big, mean. He's really an offensive lineman playing tight end
Who has soft hands.
who has soft hands. And we've talked about him before, and Jeff's actually said he thinks that Lee Smith is going to break out this year.
I think he's going to have a career year, which for him isn't crazy. He hasn't had.
Hasn't he been in the NFL for like 12 years, Jeff?
Yeah, he's been in the NFL for 11
and
years.
He's going to have a career year this year.
Yeah.
Elaborate, please.
He only averages about 1 or 2 touchdowns a year. He's only getting about 10 to 12 catches a year. But I could easily see him, since they're going to be in 12 personnel a lot.
I'm looking at
Hurst and Pitts are going to take plays off because they're going to be tired.
Sure.
They're going to be banged up. Like, whatever's going to happen.
You think
he's going to have snaps.
Yeah, that'll give him an opportunity. Yeah, that makes sense.
And defenses aren't going to care about him. He'll be open. Guarantee it. He'll get catches.
Do you guys know he
like goal line
plays...
situations, I think you could see him leak out on play action.
Yeah.
And also, too, like we've talked about 12 personnel, like with this lineup, there's no, and when you have how diverse Kyle Pitts is, there's no reason we can't run in like 13 personnel.
Right. Because you could line up Hurst and Pitts out at wide receiver, basically, and not even have them in as tight end and really just throw the defense for a loop.
Interesting.
Sorry, Ferg, you were saying something?
Yeah, it wasn't of great importance. I was just going to ask a little bit more about Lee Smith, but honestly, enough has been said about Lee Smith.
He's
in my opinion,
just a big,
yeah,
very solid blocker.
Right.
He can catch the ball when needed, but it's not like he's explosive. He's not going to get you a ton of yards after the catch. He's not going to. He's not going to wow you necessarily in the passing
I get what you're
game.
saying. He's a safety valve. He's not someone that you're targeting, but he's a nice like check down if you need it, or you're not going to draw up any plays for Lee Smith, but he's there. He's a good safety valve for when Kyle Pitts is getting a glass of water on the sideline, or you know what I mean, or Hayden Hurst is I don't know, God forbid, injured, something like that. I get what you're saying, right? He fits the bill.
Here's a quote I have from Lee Smith, and then I want to move on to the next guys. I like having my hand in the dirt and partying with the offensive lineman. I'm the run game guy. I'm in there to make sure other teams don't hit the running back or Matt Ryan. I freaking love it. Like that fires me up to have a guy like that. He's just ready to get down and dirty, party with the offensive lineman.
Do you think he's going to play? So I'm looking at some pictures of Lee Smith. Do you think he's going to play with he's this guy, by the way, when it comes to fan favorites, he's got to be one of ATL's fan favorites. I just think he just fits, I said this, but he fits the bill. Like he's just I
think he
will
be.
Right like that.
Yeah. If he's not,
he wears a helmet that has one bar straight down the middle. I mean, who the hell wears those anymore? No, I mean it. It's like it's like 1980s, era.
So Lee Smith, we're in consensus. Lee Smith's making the team. Is it anybody disagree? He's tight end 3.
No, I don't disagree.
And, in fact, I would say at times he could end up being like on the field while Pitts or Hurst is off the field, depending on matchups, depending on what we want to do, like something like that. If that makes sense.
Especially if a team has a weak run defense, really put some pressure on them to say like we may stuff it down your throat, really force them to commit to protecting the run and really hopefully open up the passing game in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. So I hate to jump back, but one thing that I did forget to say about Kyle Pitts, if you watched the OTAs at all, they said that Kyle Pitts didn't line up in the same place in the same formation one time, like through in a single day. Meaning they're going to use him all over the field. Just going back to the 12 personnel and looking for the matchups and those.
That's
kinds
great.
Of things.
I mean, that's and I think that's what that's what a lot of people were anticipating, right? That they were going to spread him out and they were going to use him as an athlete,
all over.
right? Not necessarily as a tight end, but an athlete.
Yeah, definitely. So we move on to the roster question marks. Now, my opinion, with how much these tight ends are going to play, I think Jaden Graham is a great tight end 4 that I think will make the final roster. Jaden Graham he's played really well in the limited opportunities that he has in Atlanta. This new regime decided to keep him on. And Jaden Graham also has done a great job in special teams when he's been playing special teams in the last couple of years. So I think I don't want to say a lock, but he's as close to a lock as you can get. I would say 75% Jaden Graham makes the final roster.
Interesting. What please just elaborate a little bit. What makes you so certain that Jaden Graham, with already 3 tight ends that we said are a lock, and I understand that, based on what you said, they're going to be utilizing the tight end position quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But why Jaden Graham, right?
So Jaden Graham's been in the league a little bit longer than the other tight ends we haven't talked about, and he's shown the ability that he can play in the NFL. He's shown the ability that he can be diverse. He's probably just as good or a little bit better of a run blocker than Hayden Hurst or Kyle Pitts, and he's definitely a better pass catcher than Lee Smith is. He's got a little bit more speed. He's got pretty good hands.
Something in between, right? Okay.
Yeah, he's not, we're talking about the tight end 4, right? So you can't sit here and say, okay, Jaden Graham is a superstar, but I could see him being a better overall tight end by the end of his career than Lee Smith is.
Sure.
Not saying Lee Smith isn't great, but Lee Smith is a blocking,
he's the wily vet
game,
right? Yeah, and he's a one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional. And Jaden Graham is, he may never be a true tight end 1, but I could see him being potentially a good tight end 2. I think and plus plus his special teams ability, which he's shown in the past. I think he's pretty close to a lock, in my opinion, to make the roster.
Yeah, that's the best way to make the back end of a roster is show up in special teams.
And with how much, and for you said this, with how much we're going to use tight ends, I think it makes sense to have 4.
Sure. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It absolutely does.
Yeah, I'm more 50-50 on him. I think it's just they have so many players at the skill positions that are fighting for these last spots. He may get squeezed out, which is kind of scary. I mean, so you don't want to necessarily see him on the practice squad because he has done pretty well. Mm-hmm. You don't want him to get poached by somebody. But they're going to have to make some tough decisions. So I see it as a little less than you, but I would say I see it as 50-50 for him.
One thing you have to remember, too, though, like when you're talking about special teams positions, and we do have a ton of fringe guys who are all going to play special teams, they're different positions on those special teams, right? Like there are guys who need to be bigger and block, and a lot of the other special teams guys we're talking about are like gunners, returners, fast, speedy guys, where Jaden Graham is going to be more of like, he's blocking on punt, he's taking the front guy and the on kickoff, like those kinds of things.
Man, I think that some of that or most of those tough decisions are going to come in way of the quicker players, the more. I don't want to call it, tight end position is a skill position, absolutely, but I want to say skill positions.
It's like semi-skilled,
right?
Mid-skill,
it's somewhere in between, absolutely. It's kind of like outside linebacker, right? It's like
or inside backer. Yeah. Like when you in practice when you see people running and there's like certain times, it's like offensive lineman, skilled, and then like semi-skilled or mid-skilled. Then it's usually like tight ends, linebackers,
absolutely, and so. Anyway, the reason I started to bring that up is that I think you're right, and we've talked about this before, meaning like at the defensive back position or even the receiver position. Both defensive backs and receivers, I think a lot of those guys, obviously not all, but a lot of those guys that's where the challenge is going to be. I don't think maybe as much with like the tight end role or like a Jaden Graham, being that there aren't that many options in those positions.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, instead of it being like the receivers, you're looking at more of taking spots for linebackers.
Sure.
or fullbacks, which we'll hopefully discuss. We'll hopefully end up getting to at the end of this, or if not, we'll lump the fullbacks in with the running back spot. So Jaden Graham, definitely not a lock. Jeff says it's 50-50. I'm thinking I'm going to be surprised if he doesn't make it. Now, we do have two other tight ends, Parker Hesse and Ryan Baker. Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about Parker Hesse?
Well, Parker Hesse is a converted defensive end. Played defensive end in college. So we haven't really seen him play tight end outside of what you can learn from OTAs or last year training camp from the Titans, which is where he played, which is really interesting that Arthur Smith came over and wanted Parker Hesse to come with him.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think there's something there that they like.
Yeah.
And you have to think he's going to be competitive for that end of the roster or definitely practice squad because he was on the practice squad for the Titans last year.
Yeah.
They like something about him. We don't know too much about him other than he was a defensive end in Iowa.
And his numbers are, like, if you look at his pro day numbers, they're okay. Like he ran a 4.8, which is a little slow for a tight end. But, he had a 7.9 broad jump, a 37-inch vertical, so he's explosive.
That's a good point.
So, like you said, Jeff, there's something there. There's something.
They like something. You don't just take a converted guy over to your new team just to cut him.
Mm-mm.
You have to think he's in very good competition for the practice squad and somewhat the roster.
Yeah, definitely. He's gonna, depending on, I think, his progression and just depending on, how far he can come as far as going from D line to a tight end, he could be possibly pushing Jaden Graham. I would be shocked if he made it over Jaden Graham, but they, you said it, they like something.
Yeah, I would agree with you that I don't expect him to necessarily be put in a higher spot than Graham, but he has to be competition.
Mm-hmm.
Could they retain this guy at like a fullback position? I mean, is that?
I think when you look at a guy like this and he's a converted D lineman, they could do pretty much anything that they want with him. I don't see why they couldn't play some fullback.
Sure.
He's
athletic.
Seems like
he's clearly athletic, right?
Yeah,
like
he's
you said,
an
he's
athlete.
explosive.
Yeah. There are some fullbacks that ran slower than that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be interesting. I never thought about that. That would be interesting to see him play some
honestly,
fullback.
his number, his jersey number 40, kind of like. I actually don't know if he's. I don't know if he's still number 40. He's 46, right? He's 46. So technically, right now on the roster, he's listed as number 46. And it just made me think, well, maybe they shuffle this guy into a fullback role. And then I started, just perusing a little bit. And, listening to what you guys were saying in regards to his ability, his explosiveness, and his abilities, right? Obviously, transitioning from defensive line to tight end, not anyone can just do that. You have to be a good athlete, right, to be able to make that transition. So,
and also, too, when you talk about tight ends, there's like two kinds of tight ends, right? Like an inline tight end, so someone who's going to line up in the line, and then you've got like your traditional H-back. So when you look at, like when you're talking about those guys, the perfect example is if you look at the New England Patriots back in the day, was 2016 when they had Hernandez and Gronk, and Gronk was
further back than that, I believe.
Further back.
You're gonna wish it was only that long ago. It's a little further back.
I'm showing my age. But when you look at that, like Gronk was your traditional inline blocker, and he was traditionally on the line next to the offensive lineman, and then Hernandez was more of your H-back, where he would be slightly off the line in a wing set, or kind of in the backfield a little bit. And it's possible we could see Hesse lining up there.
Yeah, and those guys traditionally take on sometimes that fullback role in certain plays. So,
and that's what made me think of when Ferg was talking about that.
Yeah.
So jumping over to our next guy, Ryan Becker. Now, Ryan Becker is another very interesting prospect. He didn't start in college. He was the backup. But, I mean, the starter got drafted, so, he was behind some solid lineup. Now, his pro day numbers are pretty good. He ran a 4.74, a little slow for a tight end. but he had 27 reps of 225.
That's impressive. Yeah. Those are good numbers.
He had a 45-inch vertical, which is decent, and a 9'10" broad jump. So he does have some explosion to him. And when you look at what all the coaches say and anybody who talks about him, they say he's like the grittiest player that they've played with.
What now? Elaborate. When you say gritty, like in what manner?
He's getting down and dirty with his blocking. He's not making his money on the routes, run and catching touchdowns. If he's smart, he's going to attach himself to Lee Smith and learn everything he can, because Lee Smith has made a career, 11 years in the NFL, out of being the grittiest tight end he can be.
I don't know if he wants that. I don't know if he wants Lee Smith's lifestyle.
It's the way he makes the NFL. He's not making it as Kyle Pitts.
Sure, right, of course.
And so he also, they talked about how he plays every single special teams. Like, he wants to be on special teams. He's a special teams guy.
He wants to do everything he can to help the team.
Yeah. I like him. I really like Becker. I was so pumped when they signed him, and we just keep adding tight ends, which kind of goes to, talking about the 12 personnel. It kind of goes to show, like, yeah, the 12 personnel is going to be real legit for us.
Yeah, you have to almost think, no matter whether Graham makes the roster or not, they're definitely considering 2 tight ends on the practice squad.
So that's what I was going to say is I would not be shocked to see, Pitts, Hurst, Smith, all on the roster. Graham also on the roster, and then see Hesse and Becker
on the practice squad.
On the practice squad,
which is wild. That is just not done. That's so much reliance on tight ends for your roster spots, because those are limited spots.
But if you're going to use them all over the field,
then it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that if we see that, I think that that's definitely what will happen, Jeff. Me and Kyle Pitts, he's being used as an athlete. We already know this. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but he may not even end up playing out of the tight end. He may not end up taking the most snaps at the tight end position, is what I want to say.
Yeah, he could end up at receiver or slot.
Absolutely, right? Same thing with, we were saying Parker Hess. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe he ends up at fullback, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're saying, that there's just a lot of utility here at the tight end position. And
going back to something that you had said earlier, Ferg, is Lee Smith is old. He's older. Yeah. He's getting up there in age. So you're gonna want to replace him with a blocking tight end, and it sounds like both Becker and Hesse are kind of lean towards that, like being more of a blocking kind of guy. And then you've got Hayden Hurst, who, although he was a first-round pick recently, because of the baseball route you were talking about, Jeff, he's a little bit older than most of your traditional 4-year guys. I think I want to say he's 28, could be 28 this year.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So, talking about tight ends, we've got Pitts, Hurst, Smith, all locks for the roster. Jaden Graham, I'm going to say a probable for a roster spot, and then Hesse and Becker, I would say, are both probable for the practice squad. At least one of them. Now, here's my question to you guys: who, if they only were to bring one on, do you think Becker or Hesse gets the nod?
I think Hesse gets the nod just because they brought him over there. There has to be something that they like. They have to have liked his development in the change of positions, and they have to think he's going to continue to grow. You don't just bring somebody with you unless you really have faith in them. If they thought he was so, they would have went and found somebody else.
Yeah. What do you think?
I agree. I think Parker Hesse, and I believe that for all of the aforementioned reasons, not just what Jeff said, but what we were previously talking about. He's obviously an athlete. He made the transition from defensive line to tight end, and who's to say he can't transition again to fullback or maybe some kind of hybrid role.
Definitely.
Anyway,
And so I'm going to actually go the other way, and I think if they're going to keep one, I'm going to say Ryan Becker. Just one, to be a little bit different than you guys, and two, I think Ryan Becker is the safer option. Like, you know what you're going to get. He's been doing it for a long time. You know he's good on special teams. You know he's gritty. He's tough. And then Parker Hesse is, he's got more upside. But when you have Kyle Pitts, it's almost like you don't need that upside. You just need somebody who's going to come in and be able to be a good blocker.
Sure.
So, but I would be shocked. Honestly, I really think both these guys are going to make the practice squad. And I think I could see both these guys being leaned on in the future. So with tight ends, you talk about the semi-skill, and offensively, you got tight ends and you got fullbacks. So I just want to jump into that a little bit. We got two guys, kind of two guys on the roster. You have Keith Smith and John Rain, who John Rain is also kind of using that H-back tight end type role as well. What do you guys think about these two as far as like making the roster?
I thought it was interesting when Ferg was talking about Parker Hesse earlier, about him being a converted defensive player with in the 40s numbers, like talking about maybe he's an option at fullback, because Keith Smith is also a converted defensive player.
Mm-hmm.
He played the defense in college and transitioned to fullback in the NFL and has been very successful. He blocked for Ezekiel Elliott when Ezekiel Elliott had arguably his best season, and has been a great player for the Falcons so far.
So, yeah, I mean, Keith Smith has been really good for Atlanta. If you look at the Pro Football Focus ratings, he was the number one fullback in the league last year, which, it can kind of be, and I'm guilty of this, like, it can kind of be an afterthought because our run game was so poor last year that I was like, I don't even know if Keith Smith's going to make the team. But when you kind of look at, when you sit back and you watch the film and you really look at it, he did pretty well, and the run game really wasn't because of him. And the other thing, kind of talking about Keith Smith and special teams and Jaden Graham, is Keith Smith's been very good on special teams his entire career. I think he's got 5 forced fumbles through his years on special teams.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I would be shocked to see him not make the squad.
Yeah, he seems like a very good fit, and he's been very productive at a position that there isn't always a guy on the team that's a fullback.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have a guy, you might as well have one of the best.
Yeah. And I know the Titans didn't use a fullback for a while, and then I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I know that their game and their run game improved when they started playing with a fullback.
And they didn't even have the same quality of player.
Are we seeing a resurgence in the fullback position? I wouldn't necessarily say like in the traditional fullback position, but it seems as though the fullback position is being salvaged by a lot of teams and then just remodeled.
It's like so tough because so many colleges don't use a fullback that it's so hard to find fullbacks. So you're getting a lot of these, linebackers, defensive players who, weren't good enough to be defensive players, but they can come in and they're fast, physical, or not fast, but have good bursts and they're physical, that they can play fullback.
Yeah, and they know how to find the guy that they're supposed to hit.
Yeah, yeah, because they've been on the other end of it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right, sure.
So I'm not going to say Keith Smith's the lock, because I think with how much that we use tight ends, and some of these other tight ends can play fullback, and they might be more versatile than Keith Smith, but I would be shocked if he didn't make the team. I would say 90% Keith Smith makes it.
I'm the same way. Exactly.
What are the chances? I mean, it's probably better opportunity. I was going to say, what are the chances, or in what scenario does Keith Smith get cut? Right? Is there a scenario where you guys see maybe that probability or that percentage go up?
I think it just depends on what Arthur Smith wants
Sure.
to do. If he sits there and goes, our tight end game is too strong for us to, keep Keith Smith on the roster. I want, Jaden Graham's doing great on special teams. I could see a world where Keith Smith doesn't make it. I don't think that'll happen, but I could see it.
Yeah, it's just if they really fall in love with the tight ends and
the versatility of what you can do with the tight ends. Keith Smith on offense isn't that versatile.
he's going to come in and block.
Yeah,
that's what he's going to do.
He's not doing a whole lot else. his like average rushing.
Right, he's a utility.
So he's not utility.
Yeah.
He's just coming. If he comes in, he's blocking.
Right. Gotcha.
Where like some of these tight ends are more.
They
they're
are
more
utilities.
utility
Right.
type guys.
Sure.
But what he does really well.
When I, for whatever reason, when I thought utility, or when I said utility, I'm thinking like utility workers. You guys you see out there working on the gas lines and the just gritty, blue collar.
He is. He is. That's what he is. He likes to hit.
Right.
But when you look at it, through his years, he's got 11 catches for 59 yards. Yeah.
Tell you what, it's more than John Rain's got.
Oh, I'm sorry. He had 11 catches for 59 yards last year, but total he has 17 catches for just over 80 yards. So, not a ton. It's like a catch for 10 yards every season.
But that's not what he's there for.
That's not what he's there for. And that kind of goes just to the utility. So, I think he's going to make the team. But if Arthur Smith says we want to play with more, more utility, more guys that can do different things, we're doing it. So the other guy and the last guy for us to talk about is John Rain. He's more of like the H back. He was a fullback at Northwestern, and I just don't see. And I'm sorry, John, but I just don't see how he makes the roster.
That's not a great way to start it off, then.
I know.
It's a tight squeeze, and somebody has to be edged out. And when you're talking about how many tight ends are potentially making roster/practice squad, when you think about the running backs, the wide receivers, there's really just not a lot of room for him.
The tight ends.
He's he was number 0 at Northwestern. That's how many.
He's number.
That's how many snaps he's going to take in the NFL. 0.
Oh,
boy.
He's number 89 for us now as a fullback. So, and I think he did a lot of good things in college, but he's 6'1", 230 pounds. So he's already significantly smaller than the tight ends that we've talked about. His versatility is going to be much, much lower. I don't know. He's not as good of an athlete as the guys we've talked about. He's not as big. We were already talking about not keeping one fullback, possibly. There's no way, in my opinion, there's no way that
he has no differentiating factor.
Yes, that's a perfect way of putting it.
And you need it. When they're cutting from 90 to 55, you need something.
And when we're talking about, the 40-yard dash times, he ran I'm pretty sure he ran a 5 flat.
It's tough.
Yeah. And he did a lot of good things. He's a good college player, and it's too bad,
5 flats
just too bad.
First
5 flat at 230 pounds. Yeah. You've nothing, like Jeff said, you've got nothing differentiating you. So, that's it. We went over tight ends, we went over fullbacks. Is there anything you guys want to say before we sign off?
No.
I look forward to seeing where this goes because we really don't have an idea exactly about how it's going to shake out for the guys at the bottom.
Well, of course, Jeff. That's why we're talking about it. I'm just kidding. Come on, I'm kidding. Please continue.
No need.
He got flustered. Jeff got flustered.
I didn't mean to screw up.
Now Ferg feels bad. All right, guys. While Jeff and Ferg make up, I wanted to take this time to thank you guys for tuning in and listening. It's always a pleasure having you guys, and we hope you learned a thing or two about the tight ends and fullbacks on the Falcons. Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.